All right. So I hit the live button. While Justin deals with some technical difficulties, I will hang out and talk to you guys. This is episode 44. Of course, Justin Musterman, Legacy Herps on Instagram. He is trying to fight through Chrome and StreamYard and all of the associated security features therein. So while he does that, I will talk to you guys. I kind of missing out a little bit, had to reschedule a bunch of things for work. So we've had a little bit of lapse in time. As always, up there at the top for Black Box Cages, I continue to enjoy all of their stuff, watching all the guys get new things. Justin just recently put together the XT4 for his Ackies, and that's when I realized, which I should have realized way earlier since they sponsor us, they send stuff flat packed, which is super cool, and so I'm very excited to try some of that out. I've really been wanting to do their 6x3x3. I want to try and set up something naturalistic / bioactive for some tegus, and I think that the really deep litter dam in that 6x3x3 will make a big difference for that. But my worry is, or was, I couldn't get in the door of my shop if I got it assembled and brought it home in one piece, because at the time I had seen Black Box at a show and I saw some of their enclosures and I was really excited, but I was worried about trying to get it in the facility. So now that I saw Justin put it together from Flat Pack, I'm pretty stoked to try and get one of those. And then I want to see if they're potentially stackable. And I think I could do a 6x3x3 on top of the tegus for bearded dragons. But instead of doing the zoopoxy, which I worry would be a little heavy, I thought about trying the expanding foam with dry lock and see if I could build something that way to try and save on weight, maybe. And I thought I could do a stack and still have it support it. So I'm going to research that some more and I will let you guys know how that works. Justin is continuing to fight the good fight with technology. And so we will hang out and wait for him. And then as soon as he gets here, I will click live and ask him every single thing about Sri Lankan lizards all at once. And then we'll go from there. No, I'm just messing around. Hopefully his tech catches up. I will message him and talk to you so there isn't dead air. I can see 60 you watching. You should say something in the chat. Tell Justin that you want to hear all about weird-nosed lizards. I'm sure there's a bunch of animal nerds here as well. Talking to the non-existent chat. Let me know how it goes getting back in. All right. See, 9 people watching, no chat going. That's ridiculous. That's cool. We were speakerphone to start the episode. Right before I hit the live button, Justin was trying to use his more tech-savvy fiance to help him get in. And it worked, but I couldn't see him, and then he was out, and I think now we're trying to get back in. Nick, there you go, Nick. Thank you for being the first. Solid start with the thumbs up. There actually is not a lot going on here. My kids FaceTimed me today to do a sling transfer for some pulcher peas that Indy has, and they were a little too wet, so she had to transfer some stuff and dry those out. The things above me, I can't control my hands in opposite space, are all invertebrates, so not lizard type things for you nerds. That's all invertebrate stuff. And then off to the right of me are a whole bunch of plants. There's actually Oh, where does my hand go? Plant that way as well. Um, Continuing to do plant nerd things. I post all the time. Clint hooked me up with plants previously for myself, and then hooked me up again with plants to donate to my alma mater as an honorarium for a professor of mine who he runs the greenhouses and does all sorts of stuff. Forestry. He is a blacksmith. He's a just incredibly skilled individual, and he has worked at the college that I graduated from for 20 years. Actually, got there the year right before I did because this was my 20th year reunion from high school, and so his 20th year reunion for his start at the school. And he was given an honorary chair, and part of that is an endowment, and it comes with like a stipend of funds so that they can do kind of do your own research. You're not really beholden to a grant or anything. And so he was honored with that. And so at his honorary ceremony, him and two other professors, I presented him with this package of plants from Clint that is going to go in the greenhouse. And he does all kinds of cool stuff where he has students will come in and do a bonsai tree throughout their time at the university and then take it with them. He's done that a couple of times. And I thought that quite a few of the little tropical plants that Clint has passed on to me would really work for something like that, where they could do cuttings or grow smaller ones for like each student and continue it on. Um, a lot of the stuff is some of the things are, you see the bigger ones at like Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, just in like the tropical plant section. And then to see that progress from the tiny cuttings, I thought would be really cool for the professor to show his students in the same way that we do. When I was there, I did the same thing with saltwater and different things like that, progressing large coral cultures from frags and stuff like that. And they, at that school, are continuing, or now continuing, I suppose, to do educational outreach for reptiles. So I was pretty stoked about that. Um, I'm probably going to be helping with that in the future. I hope to be able to get back and participate in some of that. And they just got another grant type of situation for an outdoor classroom. And so that should be really cool. Um, I told everybody I was going to put a alligator snapping turtle in it because they're endangered in Illinois, and I have several, and I'm an alum of that school. So if I donate it, they have to take it. No, that's not true. I would never force someone to take a dinosaur. So Justin is continuing to have technology struggles. What's up, Jessica? Thanks for checking in. Ooh, Jessica. Speaking of Jessica, who is always in the chat and ever present, asks good questions, is quite a dedicated lizard nerd. Jessica hooked me up with one of the new Frogs & Co. Terrariums, and the kids and Teresa picked it up at NARBC. It's one of the ones that already has the drain built in and has, the lid is set up for mister nozzles and all that good stuff. While I've been here in Pennsylvania, they were having sales on some of the pieces and parts that go to Frogs & Co. stuff. So I got a light on clearance. I got a few of their substrate components and different things. And then I was talking about that on some previous episodes. Jessica messaged me. She won one of these in a US ARC auction and then hooked me up with the homie price, which I am greatly appreciative of. And so Teresa and the kids picked it up, and that will be the next project that's going to happen. I'm going to work with Indira on that, and we're going to do the dry lock expanding foam background for that. And some of the plants that you guys can't see from Clint are going to go in that. So I'm pretty stoked about that. That was a super fortunate series of events to have that come to me from Jessica. So that was super cool. And I keep looking down off screen and not talking to you guys because I am getting texts and messages and all those things. I just assume Justin is somewhere in the northeastern part of the United States throwing his phone at a wall. It's possible. Yeah, Jessica, I think it's going to be really cool. If anybody follows Troy Goldberg on YouTube, Troy's Tropical Garage, he has just absolutely insane. Dart frog enclosures. He gets a lot of really cool, like custom glass. He's shown a few different um, rack systems that he purchased that they're kind of like conduit. That was really impressive. And then he's super in depth with his builds. And of course, he does a lot of the dry lock method. That's huge for dart frog nerds. And so I've been following him quite a bit. And so I am probably going to shamelessly copy from him and utilize something that he is, or something similar to one of his builds, and I will try to replicate that. And then I think we're going to go be super basic with it and like just do a crested gecko or something. I have quite a few cresteds that came from Dr. Justin Julander, which is pretty cool. And some of the, well, more than some of those turned out to be boys. And so they can't hang out together. So one of them is probably going to get a really sweet, crazy mansion that I'm going to build out of that Frogs and Co thing and plant the crap out of and do bioactive ridiculousness with, and then put a super basic lizard in it because I think that's really funny. And they're one of the few that actually isn't destructive to stuff like that. The reason you can build baller enclosures for dart frogs is because dart frogs don't tear up plants. Like that is kind of part of it. They actually have a 24-inch tall version of that Frogs & Co., which I'm super excited to screw with. I really want to build one of those and stick some Amazon tree bows in it so they're beautiful, but also wants to bite you in the face. I think that'd be really fun. And I'm also getting text messages because it's snake feeding day, and the family is feeding a 16-foot reticulated python and 8-pound rabbit. So surprisingly, or not surprisingly, I suppose, it didn't take very long and she's already done. That was the text I got to update that. Something I do want to tell podcast folks and all 8 of you who are currently watching will definitely push it over the edge. I made a TikTok on, I know, I understand, but please hear me out. I made a TikTok on the Coal Black Exotics TikTok page. And it basically is bashing obese pythons. And it's like this close to having 1 million views. So if you have TikTok or have a kid who has TikTok or something, send them that way. I interact with all the comments. It's been super crazy. I've answered like several hundred snake questions. It's been pretty ridiculous. And I think it's going to be a really neat secondary education platform, I suppose. Just it gets a lot of people's attention and they ask basic questions, but nobody wants to answer basic questions. So I'm going to try and do it there. Did a couple of snake locomotion posts, a tortoise post, some fun things like that. And then, of course, because you're all lizard nerds waiting to hear about Sri Lankan things with Justin, I will obviously post lizards. Our collection is very diverse. I just started with the pythons because obese pythons are a hot button topic for me. And so they made the post. I can see a box and I see a Justin. There he is. So he's putting in earbuds and I will let him hang out for a minute and make sure it's all functional before I shove him in here. Let's see what we can do. All right.
1 second. 1 second.
You're good, man.
Technical difficulties here.
I'll just mute you and the 9 people watching will just stare at you awkwardly. Don't worry.
Okay.
So we can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you through the earbud.
But can you hear me at all?
Barely.
That's because technology hates us.
I think I might be able to hear you now.
That would be kind of weird because I wasn't talking.
No. Still
anything? Not. So there isn't any echo if you want to just try and turn it up on your phone and just use the phone. It's not echoing, so that's cool if that works for you.
Yeah, the only problem is I really can't hear you at all, even with that. So this is connected. Let me just see if I can. I know it's connected, but for some reason I don't hear anything through it. It says it's connected. These things are too weird.
It's all good, man. I was regaling everyone with tales of enclosures and TikTok, so
I'm not sure what's going on here. If I hit this home screen, I'm afraid I.
Sideways face. All right. So we will let him fight with his phone. I can see you.
We were just working 2 seconds ago.
It's all good. The only reason it's not working is because you really want it to work right now.
I really don't get this.
Any luck?
Do you know how to use these things? Because now the earbud won't work. It's connected, but I don't hear anything else.
It's technology. I love technology. It works every time you want it to and then doesn't. Because the image is like perfect and we can hear him great. He just can't hear us, which sucks because it makes it almost impossible.
Yes.
Any luck?
Not yet. I'm trying to. I know it's connected to. Let me see. I don't want to leave the chat, so I'm trying not to hit the wrong button on the phone. But as far as my Bluetooth settings.
And through the miracles of editing, no one will ever know.
That thing that says mic on the screen.
Well, that just muted you.
You have a plug-in pair for an iPhone. Right. God almighty, this is terrible. Yeah, they're for an iPhone. Don't we have any of the old school kind? Yeah.
It's all good.
There's got to be, yeah, there's got to be something. One second. Enjoy the enclosures, I guess.
Don't worry about it. I actually am kind of glad we ended up seeing all the enclosures. That's pretty cool. Justin wasn't totally sure where he wanted to sit for the interview, and it ended up being right in front of his super cool enclosures, which is one of the things I'm sure most people wanted to hear about. So that's pretty exciting. While we are waiting for him to try to figure out the headphone issue, I just booked my final guest for the year. So I am booked every other Sunday all the way through the 18th of December, which is pretty cool. So I will have, I think, what do we got? Like 2, maybe 3 in November for how the weeks fall out, and then 2 in December, I think is what it ends up being. Maybe it's 2 and 2. So that should be really cool. Gecko people, anole people, a random lizard collection guy who also is a zookeeper. Yeah, there's going to be
I guess we're just going to have to try and roll without him. So
Okay.
if I have to ask you to repeat yourself, I guess it's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but I can barely hear you even through the camera.
No, it's all good. So I
So
rambled on and introduced you and talked about some stuff. So just tell us everything about Sri Lankan lizards, and then that's fine. No, I'm just messing around. But yeah, why tiny agamas from Sri Lanka that look weird? Like what? Why
well,
those?
they're just super interesting animals. You know, I've it kind of was like by chance, I guess I could say. You know, I had a friend at the time I wasn't really keeping much of anything again. And I happened to, I was like, you know, I kind of want to get back into it. And I called a friend and asked if, you know, there was anything that he had that he wanted to part with. And he had the leaf nose lizards. And he's like, yeah, I was kind of thinking about getting out of those. And I was like, I'm interested. And they kind of sparked the entire thing for me. You know, they're just a super interesting group of animals. And I've always, for the most part, kind of gravitated towards the cooler climate species. Maybe because here in the Northeast, it's definitely one of the. It's easier for me, I guess, than most people to keep them. Being in New York, so you know, you try and take advantage of the, you know, the environment that you have to work with. You know,
For sure. So now I'm fairly new to being a planted, bioactive, setup, cool plant nerd type of person. Um, does it being cooler like that, does that affect the things you pick for plants, or how you choose to set up the enclosure? Can you kind of just use plants from the garden center, or how do you go about that? Because they are cooler animals. I've always wondered that.
sorry, Bill. I'm still trying to. I'm so sorry. I can barely hear what you're saying, so I'm still
It's
trying
all
to
good.
mess around with this. If you give me one more second, let me just see if I can't figure this out in the Bluetooth settings. It's got to be something with that.
Sure. Don't worry about it. Well, let's see what happens. So I'll try to mess with my mic. Maybe it's me. You never know. Well, how about now? Nope. Same thing. Mic. Hmm.
Is that any better or no?
You're awesome. We can see and hear you
Yeah,
perfect.
no. These are still failing me. So, man, I had them in when I was on the phone with you a few minutes ago, and they were fine. So I don't know what the deal is, but sorry. So, like you said, it's just a little hard to hear you. Even the microphone on the phone itself is not really working, but we'll get through it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's all good. So, no, what I was asking about before was how do you deal with plants in the cooler setting like that, as opposed to all the tropical plant nerds that have hot and humid and can grow whatever they want.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Here, let's try to do this. Can you see the chat? Let's do that. Oop, I hit all on that. Can you see the chat?
No. There's a little icon at the bottom of my screen that says chat.
So click on that and see if it pops up.
I mean, it shows me a screen that says chat and comments.
And there's no comments in there?
Not yet. Yeah. Now, yeah. I see some comments now.
Do you see the one from me?
How do you select plants for your setups with the cooler temps? Yeah, so that's not really hasn't been an issue that I've ran into. I don't really know a whole lot about plants for the most part. I just kind of grab whatever I like and what looks more or less natural to the lizard's environment. You know what I mean? So I try and create all the habitats and setups as close to what their natural environment would look like. I don't necessarily take into account, what the plant, like what type of climate the plant is coming from, but for the most part, as long as it's not freezing, which none of these animals really ever approach that kind of cold. I don't really ever have an issue with what plants I'm putting inside the enclosures, where the plants die off. The one thing I don't really have luck with is ferns for the most part. They seem tougher than any others, but I've heard that from several other people that's ferns are something that kind of some of them do really well, others don't. So that's pretty much it as far as that goes.
I'll just keep doing it this way. If the chat will work, I don't care. I can type fast.
Let me switch back to the chat.
Oh, sorry. I keep forgetting when you're on a phone, you have to like juggle buttons.
What's that?
You're good.
Did you put a comment there?
I did, but it probably didn't show up. Let's see. I was asking about lighting.
Yeah, I didn't see a new comment.
Well, that's weird. Let's do that. And Mike Stefani shows up.
Perfect.
It's all good. We'll figure it out. No, I was asking.
Do I have bioactive setups? Sorry, I was scrolling the wrong way. I do. Every setup that I have is bioactive. I just find that it's a lot easier. Number one, they're easier to maintain. Number two, again, it's more natural to the lizards, to the animal's habitat. The only ones I really maybe some don't do the bioactive with are some of the offspring, some of the babies for the most part. But even them, it's usually live planted. There's only a few enclosures that I have like fake or plastic plants in. Otherwise, everything gets live plants. Even if it's not soil, there's a sphagnum moss substrate with plants that are left inside inside their containers, basically, instead of actually like planted into the vivarium for the most part. But I prefer to use live plants. For me, it's more or less like I want it to be aesthetically pleasing to myself as well as for the animals. So I just kind of roll with that, and it keeps things simple, especially bioactive. Like some of these enclosures, the ones over my shoulder, the one over there, that's been set up for over a year now, and it still looks great. Wow. The one in the center is the only one that's even the newest one, and that's probably a month and a half to 2 months in now. And the one on the opposite side, that's also at least been set up for a year now. So, and they, wow. You put all your organisms in, and everything seems to do great. As long as you've got a nice, healthy setup there.
Very cool. Very cool. So, you You have to have full spectrum lighting for the plants.
This is gonna be super weird the entire time, but
Don't worry
every
about
time
it.
you ask a question, I'm just gonna lean in, so everyone's gonna get a look at my bald head, and then I'll come back
So,
down. Go ahead.
if you scroll the chat, I put a question about light.
Lighting, sure. Yeah, Nick, I don't have a speaker. Wait. Yeah, I don't think. You know what? Hang on. Nick just brought up a good point. This may or may not work. I do have like a Bluetooth wireless speaker. Do you think that would work?
It's worth a shot.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, Mike, using the temps that you do for monitors, fake plants is usually the way to go. Other than, I am really interested in trying out more grasses for the monitors beings, even with the high temps. Well, let's see what happens. Or it's going to get crazy echo feedback. And I'm the only one wearing headphones, so if it blows anybody out, it'll be me.
Wait a minute. Maybe we found the solution here. Let's see if this.
Any luck? Any difference? Nope. Pushing buttons. Oh, disappeared. See, Nick, man, you tried to do the right thing. Give a guy an idea. That's what happens when you do a live podcast. Is it never works how you want it to work. No, Mike, what I was saying though is I'm really interested to try some of the, like, Ryan McVeigh turned me on to rye grass seed. Grows super fast. Thanks, Nick. He'll figure it out, man. It's all good. I'm really interested to try rye grass seed. I've used it in some enclosures. It grows really fast. The problem is it's really breakable. And so it doesn't ever look like perfect grass. But if you're keeping really big monitors, I don't really care about that. It's more like, yeah, it's cool to look at. I just think it looks neat to have the little grass in there or whatever. But I just kind of want something for them to interact with. Like with my Argus and stuff like that, they're going to dig it up and mess around and do what monitor lizards do anyway. So that doesn't bother me. But if in the interim you can get, grassy patches to grow, I just think that might be more kind of like naturalistic behavior for them. I don't think it would really matter as much for the like big adult lizards like I have. But if you were doing something like a guy like Mike that has a lot of babies in smaller to medium sized lizards, maybe having that like short grassy layer and then just chucking in a bunch of super worms or something and get that foraging behavior.
Is that
any luck?
I just don't know why this doesn't work. It just gave me the option to.
If it makes you feel any better, so far everyone's blaming Nick, although he did take responsibility. Jessica, I've tried fountain grass and some things, and I cannot grow that stuff for nothing.
Right. So Ryan
and gone again. And it would be the dude that has like the coolest lizards ever, right? Like Ceratophora, Calotes, like just the coolest possible collection, and we cannot get his phone to work to save our lives. No, we'll figure it out, or if he can't, we'll bring him back on. It's all good. I'm super glad that he agreed to come talk. Oh, here he is again. Let's see.
There we go.
Back in the stream.
Yeah, they're trying to figure this out with the bottom. The Bluetooth speaker doesn't seem to work. I did have better volume for a second, but I feel like every time I hit more down on the bottom, it gives me the option to turn the mic up, and I could hear you better, but then it brought me out of the chat. So I guess, like I said, we'll just roll with what it is.
It's all good.
Yeah, I can definitely hear you a little bit better now. So
okay.
Yeah.
So, man, mostly my questions for you were, everything you keep is weird. And like, how do you know what to do? Like, do you just have a giant book that says this is what Sri Lanka's like? Or like, is it a bunch of trial and error? Like, how did you learn to keep the weirdest lizards that nobody's ever heard of? Like,
it's a lot of trial and error. You know, sometimes a lot more error than anything. You know, kind of more recently too, but maybe we'll get into that later. But it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of research, you know, and that's the thing. Pretty much all these lizards that I keep, they're like in the room that we're in currently, there is no care guides. There's nothing that you're going to look at on the internet and find out how to take care of, you know, Calotes pethiogodi, or how to take care of Ceratophora tenenti. They just don't exist. You know, I might try and work on some of that to put that info out there for people. You know, when I feel like that I have a better understanding, even because even myself, I'm constantly learning, you know, about these animals and what their actual requirements are. But yeah, it's mostly research, and it's not as hard as some people may think. You know, you can, if you know where an animal comes from, and I guess this kind of, you know, relates to any species that you're going to keep. If you know where an animal comes from, different localities, elevations, things of that nature, you know, you can do research on that area. You know, find the weather patterns, find you know, anything, the rainfall, you know, the temperatures, you know, and kind of go from there. And that's really what I base a lot of this on, you know, and also from just anybody who's had previous experience with those species, you know, kind of bouncing off ideas off each other as well, or gaining that knowledge from people who've kept them previously, you know. So, but yeah, it's, you know, it's definitely research on your part, basically.
So did you start out with oddball species, or did you progress to this from more of the quote unquote beginner type things?
Yeah, it was a natural progression. But I've definitely always gravitated towards the rare and the uncommonly kept. I've never been someone who, you know, really wanted to work with bearded dragons or leopard geckos or ball pythons. You know, I started keeping reptiles when I was like 5 years old. And the first, it wasn't exactly a reptile, it was an amphibian, but the first, you know, herp that I ever kept was it was a red eft. And I remember catching it. The first time I found that, like I said, I was probably between 4 to 6 years old, somewhere in there. And my grandparents used to go camping a lot, and they would bring, you know, me and my sister, and my grandfather would always take me out fishing early in the morning on a reservoir. We would go trout fishing. So we were leaving early one morning after a heavy rainfall, and we were walking out to the car, and in the yard of his, you know, his campsite, I found a red eft in the grass, and I had no clue what it was. It was the first one I'd ever seen in my life. And, you know, when I had, you know, caught it, kept it with me, friend of my grandfather's had told me that it was a Tasmanian man-eating devil. And I didn't know any different. So I went around telling everybody that, I had this Tasmanian man-eating devil. And then, when I got home and started to research it and found out it was a red F. But yeah, it kind of just all snowballed from there. But I was always, like I said, interested in some of the, more uncommon stuff. I definitely kept, again, and this is, I was super young, 6, 7, 8 years old, kept, Pac-Man frogs and red-eared sliders and stuff like that. Probably like the first uncommon reptile, and at that time it was uncommon, that I ever kept was a Senegal chameleon. And that was when like nobody was ever keeping chameleons. And there was a pet store that I frequented, when I was a child, like right up the street from my house. So I would get out of school and walk there every day. And, I remember the pet shop owner, when he got those, he was like, you can buy it, but I can guarantee you it's going to be dead within a month. And I got it and took it home and, knew nothing about the care of this animal. And there was no internet to, look up to do any kind of research on it. But from the books that I could find in the local library, I set it up in basically like a paludarium type setup, and I kept that animal alive for over 3 years. And it was an adult female Senegal chameleon when I had gotten her. So, they're not a very long-lived species to begin with. But
wow,
I guess that was kind of the start into, like I said, the more rare, a little bit more demanding species to work with.
Okay, very cool. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So I can actually hear a cricket in the background. So
yeah.
No, don't worry about it. That's it's a reptile room. That's how it's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
What do you do for feeders? Do you raise feeders? Do you buy feeders? How do you deal with that with so many insects?
Most of my feeders I buy. Okay. Even the dubia roaches, I kind of have a dubia roach colony, but I end up going through them way faster than they reproduce, so that doesn't really work for me. For the most part, I buy them. I like kind of raise a few maybe oddball feeders that are just kind of supplemental, like green banana roaches, just because it's something different to give the reptiles on occasion. Yeah. So, but for the most part, I do buy them. I don't really, want to get into raising many bugs or cultivating, super worms or wax worms or anything like that. I have a friend that tried doing that with wax worms, and apparently they're super, super tiny and they will get everywhere no matter what you do, when you're trying to raise them. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the feeder track, do you supplement your stuff, and then do you use UV for your animals, or no? How do you?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. That to me, like, I feel like that's one of the most important things is making sure that your insects are gut loaded with a really good content, of different vitamins, minerals that they're going to get. So I mean, bee pollen is like a staple as far as what I want to supplement or basically gut load my bugs with. I don't use any kind of commercial gut loaders that are on the market. I use a bunch of organic fruits, vegetables, bee pollen. For calcium, I'll give them cuttlefish bones to eat. What else do I use? Like a spirulina powder, usually in a fish flake form for the protein. I'll even do chamomile flower sometimes, like dried chamomile flower, so just a wide variety of different things. I mean, I kind of try and think of like, what are these bugs going to feed on, even though it's not necessarily in the natural environment of the lizard, but what do bugs feed on in the wild? They feed on plant matter, you know what I mean? Different, little bits of whatever, flowers, different, pollen, stuff like that. So I just kind of try and gut load them with that. And then I do supplement powders as well. And yes, I definitely use UV. I use UV on everything. So firm believer on that for sure.
Okay. And Is there any difference from babies to adults in how you treat with supplements or lighting or anything like that? Do you work them into it, or does everybody get the same? How do you deal with that?
For the most part, everybody pretty much gets the same. I try and make sure that, any of the producing females are obviously getting a lot more calcium than, let's say a baby or something like that to keep up with the egg production. But yeah, for the most part, everybody gets relatively the same, the same supplements and everything like that. And I found it works for me. At least maybe it doesn't for everybody, or I'm sure a lot of people do something different. But for me, for these species, I find that that's what works best.
Okay, that's
yeah.
Good. So, kind of on the baby track,
sure.
You obviously keep and produce some really oddball, kind of rare species. Is that one of those things where it's like, do you kind of just want to keep all the babies and make sure you have a colony that can keep itself going? Or like, I don't know, I would just be kind of worried, like I might not be able to get any more. So I don't want to let these babies out into the world and then not have that species. Like, how do you?
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, that's super important for me to have a big enough group to keep them going for years and years and years, because you're right. A lot of these species, we'll never see, you'll never see them come in to the country again. You know what I mean? So that's definitely a big thing to have, enough holdbacks. For the leaf-nosed lizard specifically, that has not been the case for me, because in the past year and a half, I've produced roughly 300 babies out of 4 females. That's so I literally couldn't get rid of them fast enough. And I still have a decent group here. I still have, I think, a 3.5 group here. And I actually just sent Ryu out some of my adults earlier this week. I sent her 3 babies and 2.1 of my adults, because, I kept a few different holdbacks this year from specific animals, and I did suffer a few losses with some of the females. They kind of outproduced themselves for the most part. With those guys, you kind of almost can't stop them from breeding. And it's kind of a wonder why they're even endangered in the wild, but I don't think they probably don't breed that prolific in the wild. I think it's because the captive conditions are, at their optimal, so they're just producing. Over the summer, I had like 20 to 30 babies of those hatching out on a monthly basis. So it got to be overwhelming. It got so overwhelming to the point where I stopped digging up eggs. So I just needed it to slow down.
Wow. That's a super cool problem to have, though.
It is. It's a great problem to have with such an awesome species, because, those I would say have been my biggest success story, in 20 some odd years of, more than 20 years of keeping reptiles, but breeding. I've probably been breeding reptiles for, maybe a little less than 20 years, something like 18 years. And I've never had so much success with any single species that I've worked with. So, like I said, it's a great problem to have, but it can get overwhelming at the same time,
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So you were talking about holdbacks and building a group and things like that. And so in a project like yours, I don't honestly know, I guess, is you're not like holdbacks because you want, like, I want the stripy one or whatever. Like, your holdbacks would be more numbers of females, like actual reproductive status holdbacks, so I can keep my group, as opposed to I'm going to breed for red or what, it's not necessarily a line breeding thing. It's an actual continuation of the species issue for your collection.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's really what to me, that's the most important thing, is preserving these species in captivity. Like I said, some of these species are CITES 1, so they'll never come in or out of the country again. So preserving the species and making sure that I can keep them going for as long as I possibly can is definitely more important to me than producing, different color varieties. Although I kind of think I'm going to go with that trend for the Sri Lankan leaf nose lizards, because I've kind of accomplished everything I really want to accomplish with them as far as building the group up, because there was like myself. Well, there's people that have kept them here in the U.S. and bred them previously. And like I said, I had gotten them from a good friend, and he was breeding them and having success with them. But his original group kind of got split up between myself and another gentleman, and he unfortunately had overheating incident where he lost, from what I heard, pretty much everything that was in that specific cloud forest room. And what happened was it left my group as the last known remaining group in the U.S. anymore. But I was lucky enough to have what was supposed to represent 5 different bloodlines within the original group of juveniles that I bought. And then I had another good friend who happened to have 3 that were supposed to be a trio, that had not done anything for him for obvious reasons. It was supposed to be a trio. It turned out to be 3 females. So that kind of really kickstarted that breeding project in overdrive at that point, because then I added, I had only 2 females out of the 9 juveniles that I started with. And then to add those other 3 females, it just made it explode. So, but yeah, it's more or less trying to preserve the bloodlines. But again, now I produce so many. So we went from maybe 9 animals left in the U.S. to now there's, probably close to 300 of them, give or take, that are out there in the hobby. And, just the past year and a half, which it's incredibly satisfying for me. But I feel like now there's going to be other people, and a friend of mine who did get offspring from me several months back, maybe 6 months to a year. He got his first clutch and produced his first clutch of babies out of them, had his first babies hatch, and he has a second, possibly even a third clutch at this point on the ground. So it's great to see other people having success with them now. So kind of what I think I may focus with is trying to take some of the more oddball looking ones that I have, like some of the striped variants, or some, I have a few individuals that kind of have this coral pink color to them. And when I started breeding them, I wasn't really breeding them for that, specific traits or anything like that. I was just really pairing up whichever animals, were at sexual maturity and ready to go, versus, okay, well, these 2 would look really nice together, so let me pair those 2 up. I just wanted to get something going with them right away, and didn't want to waste time with that. But like I said, now there's many, many, many more out there now. So I'm going to kind of start matching pairs up for specific colors and see if I can create some just really high colors, some weirder looking animals,
For sure.
Yeah.
So when you are pairing or grouping or things like that, how are you just pairs? Are you just trios? Have you noticed any kind of compatibility issues, or how are you addressing the actual groupings for reproduction?
Yeah. So definitely what I found with the majority of those species are pairs are the best way to go. Trios kind of throw everything off. I've noticed that there's a hierarchy between females. The males don't usually seem to be the problem in that, case when I have kept trios together. It's definitely been the females that, have a pecking order between the 2 of them. And I have had, have lost a female because of the fact that another female dominated over her, and I didn't really notice how much at the time, but it was like she had the premium laying spots where the other one would lay eggs in a spot where I would never find them. And basically, I would see she's gravid, and then, she would never really fill out like the other ones would, or produce as a healthy or big enough clutch. And she usually hit them in really weird spots where I would never find them. So it's kind of a rule of thumb for me now. I keep them in pairs and pairs only. Everything seems to be totally harmonious that way, and I never really have to worry about any issues. The males and females get along great, so I don't worry about that so much. And even with one of these guys, I had a trio together, and again, it didn't. The females used to always be out in the open when I had the two females together, and as soon as I introduced a male in there and kept the trio, the behavior of one of the females completely changed, where she's become this like really secretive animal where she just hides almost all the time. And she'll only come out after lights out. She'll come sleep out in the open and everything like that. But and it's kind of been a more permanent thing now, because I've taken the male out, and it's like her whole demeanor has changed. She's like a different animal afterwards.
Wow.
So yeah, pairs are the way to go for these, in my opinion. That's what I like to do with them, at least. If I had a bigger, if I was able to provide them with, humongous enclosures, I could see that working. But, my space is definitely limited as far as what I can give them. And I do try and give them as big as enclosures as I possibly can. You know what I mean? Like, sure. These are all 2 foot by 18 by 36 high for the Calotes pairs. And that's plenty of room for them. Probably a lot of keepers might go with something smaller, but I'd rather give them as much space as I can provide them with. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So two parts here.
Sure.
The enclosure directly behind you.
Yeah.
One of them keeps running up the wall and jumping on the plant, and it's hilarious because it looks like he's launching up off your shoulder.
I'm glad you can see it, because I can, kind of just barely make it out, and there's a little bit of a glare. But yeah, so this one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, they
it's
have
like,
antics and everything like that, so they've got a personality.
It just keeps going.
Yeah, well, she probably knows. She's like, I'm the star of the show here, not you.
It just every time just keeps, there's like that plant just keeps waving, and then you just see a lizard flop out of it every time.
Right.
So I was actually chatting with you, and you posted some Anolis species and some different things. Is it one of those, like, for you to bring in something new or to expand, or like, how do you make those choices of, you have all these crazy things and it's like, oh, giant anoles are cool, maybe I'll try that. Is it, because you experience with arboreal setups and lighting and plants and things, or how do you make those decisions?
I don't. It's always an impulse thing. I'll be honest. Come on. We all, I went fair. To, we all suffer from that, the impulse buy thing. And, again, I was at Tinley, 2 weeks ago, and I had completely planned on getting out of the Anolis because, not that I wasn't having luck with them, but I kind of found them to be a little bit of a pain in the neck as far as the babies. They don't want to cooperate, like, very easily eating, at least in my experience. And I really didn't want that to take away from the time that I had to spend down here. And I didn't want to overextend myself and have something that, really, I had a pair of baby podior that it would take me like 30 minutes to try and get them to get a meal into them. And, it became like more of a hassle. And it was like, I really don't want to get involved in this. Like, it's okay for the 2 lizards, but I'm like, what about a year down the road from now when I start producing them and I have, maybe 10, 15 of these little guys to look after, and I've got to fight with them to try and get a meal into them? So I didn't really want to go down that road, but then I, saw Ron St. Pierre set up at the show, and I saw the Ludogalaris that he had brought, and I was like, that's it. I have to have them, so I'm sticking with Anoles. So, but, being there, getting to talk with him, I don't have a lot of experience with anoles. I've had some luck with barbatus, so far.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely by no means an anole expert. But yeah, he kind of gave me some pointers and about what to do. Maybe my temperatures were a little too cool. And that was the other thing too. I kind of had a lot of the small, like the baby Anolis that I was raising up, and even the adult pairs of barbatus I had down in this room, which I'm trying to keep, under 75 degrees ambient temperature, roughly. And
Yeah.
so I think maybe I didn't have them hot enough. So now I have a second room set up that is devoted to giant anoles. So, and it's, I keep it much warmer up there. So now I have 2.5 reptile rooms going at this point. But that's the thing, it is tough when you work with, and really, the stuff that's in here is my real passion. The Sri Lankan species, like I said. The anoles are amazing too. I love them. But it is tough to try and create, an environment within an environment, so this room itself is kind of its own environment. It's in my basement, which is the best place to do species like this. But when you need to, share that same room with a species that wants, 85-degree ambient temperature with 100-watt or 100-degree basking spots, that's where it becomes difficult, and you get these conflicts between, of trying to keep these things cool enough so they're comfortable, but trying to keep these warm enough where they're doing well as well, also. So you really, I just needed to create a second room, so that's what I did. And, thank God my fiance is easily persuaded by me, by my charm. So yeah, I turned our spare bedroom upstairs into an anole and small collection of geckos at this point. But yeah, I kind of branched out into those as well a little bit.
Cool. So, do you use supplemental heating in that particular room that you're in now at all, or no?
Heating?
Right. No,
not at all. Not okay. Like there's no, I put an air conditioner in here during the summer now, just to keep it cool enough to try and keep the ambient temperature around 72 degrees. But as far as supplemental heating, no. Like when it starts to get really cold outside, it will probably maintain a ambient temperature around 65 degrees in here, maybe even cooler, definitely cooler at night. Like right now we're getting down into the 30s regularly. I'm sure you guys are probably getting somewhere around there at night now. I actually leave the basement window open with a fan that's pulling air from outside in. So it's dropping down to like 55, 58 degrees in here at night right now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what have you seen as far as the lizards' response? Like, are they still active? Are they?
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%. They thrive in those kinds of temperatures. Like there's only 4 species in this room. I have pretty big groups, like you said, as far as holding back, animals and stuff to make sure my groups are big enough to keep them going for a long time. So, it's not a large room. It's maybe a 12 by 14 area. And like I said, there's only 4 species in here. They're all from the same, 3 out of the 4 are from the same exact location. But they're all relatively from the same climate. So yeah, they're thriving. I mean, and that's kind of like what they would be at naturally anyway. So, it regularly drops down to 55 degrees, even 50 degrees where they come from at night. And then, it'll usually peak around like 75 at the most,
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So are you misting or fogging, or how are you addressing that? Do you have a mist system? Do you do it by hand?
I do it by hand. Definitely makes it harder on myself, but I do it by hand. I do have like a whole room humidifier. So when I turn that sucker on, it looks like Snoop Dogg and Willie Nelson has been hanging out in this room when you open the door. If you close the door to this room, and open it. I mean, it's just like hits you right in the face. It's almost kind of overkill. I've had like puddles of water form on the floor before if I leave it on too high and forget that it's high. I'm like, oh, got to turn that thing off. Yeah. So
see, but that kind of is the point, though, with that montane, cool cloud forest. I mean, that literally would be the cloud forest. Like, that makes sense, though.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, like I said, it's easier for me to try and create an entire environment in this room than it is to try and create, an environment, different climatic zones within, cages. So one of the reasons why I tend to stick to a certain group of animals versus kind of all over the place. And, again, that's why I've had to set up different rooms now to try and create those different environments for everybody, all but keeping species that are kind of on the same, plane.
Cool. So you were kind of talking about it earlier with the space constraints that you have. Is there any plan to expand that? Do you want to stay focused where you're at? Obviously you got suckered by Ron St. Pierre for giant anoles that want to bite people. But how do you see that progressing? I mean, because you're having like crazy success with these very specific climate species, so do you anticipate, do you want to look at Abronia? Do you want to see, any kind of transition, or do you kind of want to stay where you're at?
Well, I would love to expand, as big as I could possibly go with still being able to maintain everything, at the highest level, obviously, because you don't want to get to the point where you have so much stuff where the animals start to suffer because you can't care for it all. But yeah, I would love to continue to expand. There's so many more species that I would like to work with. I mean, I used to do a lot of Abronia previous to the Gamins. That's what I kept before that. And I did have success with them as well. Unfortunately, Abronia are weird the way, the legality issues with them and how they were so heavily smuggled and everything like that. So they're kind of, I feel like a lot of people have shied away from them for that reason. And it's for a good reason, but, it seems like a lot of that has stopped, and it's whatever's here really should at this point be bred. Like, people should want to work with those in captivity at this point and preserve what we have here in the U.S., because it's likely that you won't, see any more ever, really enter the country like that, for good reason too. They shouldn't be, brought into the country in the way they were. But yeah, I mean, I used to have a large Abronia collection previous to these Agamids. 5-6 years ago, I was working with them, and I had pretty good success with them. The only thing with that is I had one year that was really successful, and I had like 75 plus babies born out of my groups, and maybe 7 or 8 different species. The thing that becomes really tough with Abronia, though, is you have to keep them separate. The babies, the offspring, can live together for the first month or so of their life, but after that, you have to separate them. So if you don't have the room to separate, 100, if you're going to breed them on that kind of scale, if you don't have 75 baby cages or the room to do 75 individual baby cages, you're not going to have success. And I mean, that was kind of heart-wrenching. Like, I did have a lot of success the last year that I was working with them, and I didn't have unlimited space in order to, separate all these babies out. And I learned the hard way that that's really what they need. So, because they'll fight with each other. They get territorial, and they will bite each other's tails off. They will bite each other's limbs off. And even if they're not causing any kind of harm to each other, usually just the stress of them being in the same vicinity of their rival siblings will be enough where they just go downhill and just, die from stress. So there were, days where I was coming home from work to, come down here and take care of the babies, and I would find 4, 5, 6 babies dead, on any given day. And it got to the point where it was sad. I didn't want to see that. It was overwhelming. And it was actually at that time really hard for me to get rid of any of my offspring because of the fact that a lot of them were coming in, smuggled. There was, so heavily that you could buy Graminia adult pairs for, $200-300 that were gravid, when it was like, I'm trying to get, $150 a piece for my captive bred babies, and nobody wanted them because they could go, buy an adult pair, not knowing, the history or where those animals came from. They would think that they were buying a captive bred pair, but they're like, why buy babies when I can buy this sex pair of adults? So it kind of put a sour taste in my mouth. And, like I said, it was my work schedule at that time really didn't allow me to spend nearly as much time as I needed to with those guys. So it kind of, that was probably right before I kind of, like I said, I cooled off and, really just kind of emptied out the room, sold what I had off, and took a little break. I still had some reptiles, but, nothing as far as breed. They were more or less pets, you know what I mean? I had some Solomon Island monkey-tailed skinks and some Natal's mountain horn dragons and stuff like that, just kind of as display pieces, more or less.
Sure.
Yeah. But I would love to get back in, like I said, I'd love to get back into Abronia. There's just not many around anymore. Not many keepers did have success with them. The ones who are keeping them, there are a few. But now you don't really see them. But yeah, I guess, overall the answer to that question is I would love to keep expanding. It just can't happen here. I've pretty much taken over every available inch of space in our house to do that. So the next step would be to, rent a facility basically and do something like that. Yeah. So, but that's, that's a lot of money too. And that's a huge commitment. And you really need to be, making good money from the things that you're producing in order to fund that. And, unless you're Rockefeller and you can just pull money, out of your pocket and dump it wherever all the time. But yeah, a lot of us don't have that option. So you really need to have, a good following and, like I said, selling and having people want to work with the things that you're working with and have them buy those things. And the one issue that I guess I run into with, like, let's say the leaf nose lizards per se, they're not that popular, I've found.
Which is insane.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said that's insane.
To me, it is insane. I can't really wrap my head around it, but yeah, I've offered, like, if you look in the past, like 4 or 5 years ago, right? You can look at some fauna classifieds. If you type in Ceratophora tenenti on fauna classifieds, there's some old ads where they were selling for $1,800 a pair. And I sell them for like $250 a piece now for sexed unrelated babies. And I still find it really, really difficult to get rid of them, even at that price. The majority of the ones that I produce were wholesaled out to people, that wanted to buy groups of them for like $100 each.
So, first of all, I think it's hilarious that you took a break from reptiles, and the 2 species that you listed during your break were stuff that most people will never even see. That's awesome.
Wow. Yeah.
But how? So I find this a lot from folks who keep things similar to yourself, really rare, but it turns out that someone has great success with it, like yourself, right? Whatever the species may be. And then the weird pricing structure of, because in theory, like, they should be really expensive because you basically conjured up how to keep them out of thin air with like 5 other lizard nerds who just, like, that, the amount of effort and research and skill and luck and all the things that goes into producing some of these oddball obscure species, like, that should justify a pretty good price tag. Like, I don't know. It's a weird thing in herpetoculture. I don't really understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't. I totally agree with you. You know, I feel that that should be the case, but it seems like that, you know, in herpetoculture nowadays, it's more or less about what's trending. And so the crested geckos, ball pythons, those are the things that command these huge price tags in the industry now. You know, I mean, $12,000 for a cappuccino crested gecko, you know, that 20 or 30, whatever. I'm sure hundreds of other crested gecko breeders are breeding. Or same thing with ball pythons. I mean, it was crazy to even see at Tinley what some of these things command. I heard someone sold I'm not sure what morph. Maybe it was a cappuccino. Maybe it was a super cap. I don't really know anything about crested geckos, other than the fact that they eat that fruit mush stuff. Uh, but I guess it sold for like $25,000 cash. And, you know, I had brought 10 of the Sri Lankan leaf nose lizards that I had, you know, saved, raised up for that show so I can bring, you know, really big, really good, pretty much almost breedable sized animals. They were probably like 2 months away from breeding. And I sold one pair, you know, for $250 each. So, and that was it. And that was really all the interest I had of them. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish there was more people that really did want to work with the stuff that, in my eyes, needs to be preserved and needs to be bred, you know, versus I don't know. Maybe this sounds weird and I might get myself in trouble with some of the, you know, the industry leaders, but I don't really see the point in doing something that thousands of other people are doing. I want to do something original and different and, you know, that is going to make a difference in the hobby instead of, you know, who's going to create the next morph, you know. So that's
Yeah.
I don't know, morphs aren't my thing, common things aren't my thing. I've always liked to go against the grain and, you know, make your own path and do that, you know, find something that nobody else is doing and try and do it as best as you possibly can.
Yeah. Well, so my thing for specifically for somebody like you, and a big part of the reason that I definitely wanted folks to be able to hear from you is so like cresteds, and I'm glad you brought cresteds up. That whole grouping, right? They're super popular because they're really easy to care for, and like their original sales pitch was, it doesn't need heat. It's, you know, it needs humidity and some things like that. Eats that's fancy food, whatever. But I've always countered that argument, or not argument. It's a good point. Like that's great. That's why cresteds are popular. Good for them. And
Sure.
and lychees and blah blah blah. That's awesome, and I'm glad for that. But that is also the point of what guys like you are doing. Like the hard part is that they come in wild caught and they're not very expensive. Nobody really cares. Blah blah. You know, that kind of sucks. And then, you know, people will have losses and things because they're hard to care for. Okay, well, the fix to that is buy captive bred ones from a dude that did all that work, and
Yeah.
but then you still have all the benefit of, I keep it in my basement and don't turn the heat on and open up the window and let it snow in here. Like that's like that. But that's you have all of the positives of, you don't have to buy crazy heat bulbs. You don't, you know, we're not blasting it like a Euromastix, or, you know, feeding it chicks like a monitor. Like you have all the cool sales points. It's just, I don't know, like somehow finishing the pitch or something. I don't know how to get to the next hurdle, I suppose. But you meet all of those things, you know,
Yeah.
simple to care for. You can put some cool plants in it you got from the hardware store. Keep your super collectible isopods now, and whatever else you're doing with crazy naturalistic things that are super popular,
Yeah.
and put neon green cool looking Calotes with blue, or this thing with a leaf on its face, or like
Yeah.
cool, like awesome sales pitch type pets that look epic, and do the same thing. That's room
Yeah.
temperature, super chill, miss the crap out of it. Let's go. Like,
Yeah.
I just I don't know I don't know where the traction comes from of like, oh, crested geckos can stay cold. Well, so can these 5
Yeah.
like, how do you, I don't know.
Well, so like you said, though, most of these, and again, it's wintertime, so I am trying to drop the temperatures down. Not that these animals really go through much of a seasonal change like the Sri Lankan species where these guys come from. There's not much of a seasonal change as far as temperatures. I mean, you get a monsoon season just like, almost every tropical environment does. For them, they don't experience as much of a dry season because they're coming from like the central wet zone area. So I don't think there's as much of a dry period like a monsoon and then a total dry out kind of thing. As far as I know, it's pretty steady environment for the most part there. So the thing is, you really don't have to get them as cold as I had mentioned. Yes, I am letting it get down to 55 degrees or any as long as it doesn't get below 50. That's really 50 degrees is my the safe zone. I don't want them to get anywhere under that. 55, probably a little bit safer, but they don't, from what I found, they don't need to get that cold. I try and do it to, again, make it a little bit more like their natural environment because I do monitor like 6 or 7 different localities from Sri Lanka and, look at the weather patterns there. And from certain elevations, it will regularly dip down to 55 degrees at night and only get up to about 72 degrees during the day, like where the Cophotis solanica come from. Noir Alaya. It rarely ever gets over 72 degrees, and it's almost never sunshine. So,
wow.
But again, that species I've found, in captivity definitely can adapt to a little bit higher temperatures. They're probably one of the most delicate of what I keep here as far as overheating. You really probably don't want to get them anywhere over 78 degrees for any extended period of time. And same thing, I tell anybody who's purchased leaf nose from me in the past, I tell them 80 is a safe zone. Really don't let it get over 80. If it does, it's okay, but you really don't want to let it get over that temperature for any kind of extended period of time. I have one, friend who did get one for me, and it got up to like 85 consistently in that room for about 3 days, and that animal did perish, unfortunately. But yeah, like as far as the similarities to the crested geckos, the temperatures are almost identical. You don't have to let them get that cold. It's not a requirement that you do get them that cold. You just don't want to get them super hot. And like I said, 80 is kind of the safe zone for all 4 of these species that I keep in here. But yeah, so there's no basking lamps on anything in here. There's UV. So that's really the only difference as far as, how you would keep a crested gecko versus something like this. You don't need the heat. You can keep it in a cool area. So you just have to put UV on it, and they eat bugs. You know what I mean? They don't eat fruit or Pangea or anything like that. So there is that. When you get like diehard crested gecko keepers that don't, or any kind of New Caledonian gecko that don't want to feed bugs. That seems to be the biggest difference, at least from what I hear. They're like, oh yeah, I don't want to deal with bugs. So pretty much they just feed Pangea and that's it. And they don't want to mess around with anything else. But if you do keep different species and you have feeder insects that are in your arsenal of prey items or food that you normally give, your reptiles, these would fit into pretty much anything else that you're doing with stuff like that. Like I said, the only difference is that they do require UV. They do like to bask as far as, being out in the sun. But again, it's not, you don't need a basking lamp per se because they don't like it hot. They're not going to sit under a 90-degree basking spot. And yeah, so I don't really see what the big difference is either. It's confusing, but I guess probably one of the other biggest, at least for me, maybe people don't mention it as much, but kind of my thinking is, I feel like a lot of people don't want to get into something that doesn't come with a care sheet, like we were talking about before. If there's not
I could see that.
available information on how to care for that animal, readily available either in books or online, then they don't want to mess around with it. It's too risky, So, but from my experience, these animals are way easier to care for than you may think. Like the leaf nose are very forgiving and they're very simple to care for. And I really don't know of many of anybody who got some from me that said, "Oh yeah, they didn't do well, they died." You know what I mean? I think the majority of them are still out there and still alive right now. So everyone that I keep in contact with, it's a close friend of mine and everything like that. I know they've been doing great with them. They still have them. They're still alive. Everybody's the way they keep something is a little different. So it just goes to show you how, versatile and how hardy they can be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So this is kind of two parts, I guess. You mentioned the monsoon season previously. So I was wondering if that's something that you try to simulate. And then in the chat, Eric Haycraft asked, what humidity spectrum are you seeing from like middle of the day to middle of the night, or is that something you're keeping track of?
Yeah, I guess I don't keep track of that too much. I mean, I spray in the morning and I'll spray again at night, so that's I guess the most natural, way to do it. If you look at the environment, it's going to rain early in the morning. They may experience a thunderstorm in the middle of the day if it gets a little warm, but for the most part, the clouds and the cloud forests are really rolling in, at night and then stick around. So the humidity spikes the most at night and, early in the morning and stuff. And then I let, a dry out period during the day. And, we just keep repeating that cycle for the most part. I don't really try and recreate the monsoon season right now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah, I can't really say that I do that on a regular basis. I just kind of maintain their natural, spray in the morning, spray at night, and that seems to work. Everybody in this room is producing well. So yeah, it's a proven method at this point, and I just stick to that. But yeah, overall, I mean, I do have hygrometers throughout the room. Like I maintain the room's humidity usually between 50 and 60%, and then it'll spike at night when I close the door in here and turn on the humidifier. I don't leave it running during the day, again, to get a dry out, or else you're going to get mold and all kinds of weird things growing all over the place if I was to maintain it at 80, 90% humidity in this room all the time. So I let it dry out during the day. I have 3 fans going in here, all the 24/7, the fans stay on because, that's one of the big things, obviously, with higher humidity species. You have to make sure that you're maintaining, good circulation. So, yeah, I have fans in pretty much every corner of the room, and they just stay on 24/7. I kick the humidifier on at night and let that run, and then turn it off in the morning, and, everything's copacetic in here.
Cool. So, because the animals are not what people would expect, with hot spots and things like that, with quote unquote like regular reptiles, whatever. How are you dealing with eggs and incubation and that type of thing? Are you keeping everything in the room, or how are you addressing that?
Okay, so 2 out of the 4 species in this room are egg layers, and the eggs you actually have to maintain even colder than the animals themselves for the most part. So this is usually blows people's minds when I say this, but so the leaf nose lizards, they want their eggs anywhere from 60 to 72 degrees. Anything over 72 degrees usually spells disaster with the eggs. I've had, over actually just this past summer where I could not get it cold enough, keep the eggs cold enough, and they went up to about 74 for a couple days, and those clutches really didn't. I had like 2 out of maybe 10 eggs hatch, or some of them would hatch and then they would just be weak. They hatched too early. They hadn't finished fully developing, fully, absorbing all their yolk and stuff. So it's super simple. If you have a spot where you can get them cool enough. I'll be honest, I incubate the eggs from the Calotes pethiogoti and the Ceratophora tenenti, both in the same cooler, and it's literally an empty Omaha Steaks cooler. I just had a big one that was at my disposal one time, and I took that and I started doing them in there, and it's proven out to be the best way to do it. So it's stuffed in the coldest corner of the back part of my basement, and that's where I leave it. And I just put eggs in there and, make sure that the temperature stays under 72 degrees and they hatch. Yeah. So, but you can kind of play around with it, which is cool, that I've learned, with them now this year. So 60 degrees, and I've gotten them as low as 58. The eggs have gone to as low as 58 degrees before, and I had 100% hatch rate on all those clutches. But anywhere from 60 to 66 produces predominantly female, right? So, and then 68 to 72 produces predominantly male. So you can find that happy spot too between like 60, 64 and 68 where you'll get a good mix. But yeah, I wouldn't say they're 100% like temperature sex determination or anything like that, but you can manipulate, over the summer I hatched out almost all males because temperatures in the cooler averaged between 68 and 72. Now with this time of year coming around, I'll hatch out almost all females this winter. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And the pethiogoti, they can tolerate it a little warmer. So 74 degrees seems to be the max that you want to get those eggs. And I had a good split with them. I didn't see as much like, temperature, determining the sex with them. I think out of the ones that I produced, I literally produced a perfect 50-50 split on those. There was 4 females and 4 males that had hatched out. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That is so different from any, that's very, very unique. As far as incubating. That's crazy. So we are at 9:30. I know we kind of got a late start. Is there anything you want to put out? Where can folks find you on Instagram to buy lizards from you and see all your crazy pictures? Throw out whatever you would like to as far as contact info for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you had it on there. My Instagram account is legacyherps. My Facebook account is under my name, Justin Munsterman. Anybody can reach out to me through there. Email, it's highergroundherps@gmail.com. But again, I'll probably be changing that to legacyherps. Eventually, I'm kind of still at a hobbyist level. You know what I mean? I even though I've been doing this for a long time, I have always kind of considered myself more of a hobbyist and never, everybody asks me for a business card. I don't have one. I'm sorry. I will. But it's more recent that, and even Instagram, I'm still brand new to. That just happened when I was in Tinley in March, that someone set up an Instagram account for me because I had no clue how to use Instagram beforehand, until someone walked me through that. But, and I still really don't know how to use it. So I can post, but that's pretty much it. I don't know how to create a story or a reel or a video or anything like that. So, hopefully a couple of my friends are going to help me out in the future here. Maybe you'll see me on YouTube doing that kind of thing and, doing these Instagram videos that everybody does and TikTok and whatnot. But, so I mean, the name of the business will be Legacy Herpeticulture when it actually kicks off, and I'll have business cards and hopefully t-shirts and everything like that. But as for now, email would be highergroundherps@gmail.com. Instagram account is legacyherps, and then, like I said, Facebook under my name. And that's probably the best way to reach out to me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, man. I'm sorry about all the tech stuff, but I appreciate you sticking it out.
No, it's cool. I really was an honor to come on, and great talking to you and everything. So hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again in the future, and maybe things will work out. I'll get a pair of earbuds that actually work with my phone and, everything like that. So, but yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Take care.
See ya. All right. That was awesome. We had a bunch of tech problems, but who cares? Well, I don't care about that. He showed some enclosures back there. We got to watch the lizard clearly try to jump on his head like the entire show. That was fantastic. For those of you that don't know, we had originally tried to schedule this before, and obviously Justin does not enjoy tech type of things. And so we had some delays and stuff trying to figure it out. And then he came on. And then when he agreed to come on, of course, none of the tech helped out and struggled through that. And of course, it would happen to the dude that, was worried about the tech, and then it bit him. So I know I'm super glad that he agreed to come on, and who cares? Like I'll type the questions in the chat. That doesn't bother me. The dude's a wealth of knowledge. He's keeping some super cool animals. And I was being serious when I said, I just don't understand. If you can keep crested geckos, if you can keep leechies, if you can keep what he keeps, he made a good point about folks being very, I would argue that they're trained to use Pangea, to use the food products for those type of animals. That to me, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, that's more of a business construct, to be perfectly honest. I would love to have the debate on whether or not that fits their actual wild diet profile. I'm not saying it's a bad way to keep them, but I would argue that maybe the herpeticulture industry that wants you to keep those lizards also wants you to buy that food, which makes it easy to keep those lizards. And now maybe there's a little bit of infrastructure created in herpeticulture to sell you cups and holders and things designed around that food for those lizards. So maybe some of that. But none of that discounts the fact that you can absolutely keep montane, humidity-loving animals in the exact same fashion. I am super excited to hear from someone like him that he is having the success that he has in a basement in New York. Like, come on. The major argument for all of us that live in the colder climates, the Florida guys are cheating, it's always humid and warm and it's great for them and that stuff. Hey man, that dude keeps the craziest lizards you've ever seen in a basement in New York where he cranks out a humidifier and incubates eggs at 60 degrees. Like that style of keeping eliminates every argument you have for why reptiles are hard to keep. That's the anti-Uromastics. It's amazing. And they're beautiful. They're unique. They have all these super cool things. They have all of the wonderful traits that people want in reptiles, with none of the drawbacks of high heat and the equipment to control that. I think that's fantastic. So I really, I hope he has continued success. I don't see how he won't, to be perfectly honest. Like he's so good at producing them, and there is interest there. It sucks that interest isn't on the level of, commercial size stuff, but there's always going to be people that want the things that a person like him is producing because it is so unique, so impressive. And there are enough of us out here that understand how cool it is to stick one of those in your basement with some cool looking plants from Clint and, Dylan and the other guys, and just rock out in something so cold you need to wear slippers and you got a bright green lizard running around trying to jump on that guy's head. Like, dude, that's amazing. I'm so glad he showed us that and talked to us about those temperature parameters. That really impressed me. I am interested. Eric asked about that humidity spectrum. I watch a lot of Eric's stuff as well, and there are quite a few people who are doing some different things. Frank Payne comes to mind with leap habitats and the misters and foggers and things that they're coming with. Eric's style of keeping, and now with Justin, I think would work as well. I'm telling you guys, man, you need to start listening to the Chameleon Nerds. Check out Chameleon Academy podcast. Check out those folks. They're using foggers at nighttime to simulate a lot of these things. They're keeping montane chameleons, doing night drops, different things for the weird localities of Jackson's chameleons. They're doing a lot of cool stuff with animals that are at colder temperatures than you would think, using foggers and things to keep humidity up at nighttime, and really trying to eliminate a lot of the dehydration issues that happen in ways that we don't think about. Even guys like Mike Stefani, he's here in the chat. Everybody knows him as a big time monitor dude. When you listen to Mike talk about, heating up the substrate for his animals, and then they're digging down in this dirt and it's warm and wet dirt. He's increasing humidity. He's providing nesting sites, true, for temperature gradients and things, but he's allowing a lizard to dig down in 2 feet of dirt where it's warm and that dirt is wet because he keeps a bunch of gigantic water-loving dinosaurs. He's increasing humidity. That was always the Frank Reitz argument for back in the day of how you'd cook savanna monitors and make lizard jerky. And that's 100% accurate, and that keeping those deep substrates is providing humidity. He's accomplishing the same task, just in the context of his keeping high heat loving animals. A lot of the episodes that we've been having and the ways that people are keeping and the novel things that they're bringing up, it turns out are all coming back to humidity and keeping reptiles from dehydrating. So I would say that maybe there's something to that if everybody that I'm talking to is finding some unique way to preserve water in their animals. And especially, a guy like Eric who has all the lighting and timers and just full spectrum environment. What's the one question he asked in the chat? What humidity spectrum? It shows maybe a level of importance to why that question was asked. I think that's something for all of us to take away from something like that. That's really cool. So that was the episode. We struggled through all the tech stuff as always. If I can get my fingers to work the right way. Black box cages. Like I said, Justin did a video of the flat packed XT4. I'm so excited for that. I'm glad I can get things shipped now and realize they're flat packed, which I should have realized a long time ago. That's totally my stupid mistake. Always a wrong way, this hand. Herpeticulture Network. The guys are continuing to do cool things. Justin has a bunch of shirts. Check that out. Billy and Phil were just on Reptile Fight Club, which is a Morelia Python radio show, of course, but we're friends with all of them. And we all just mishmash together. They're doing cool stuff. A bunch of people in the Herpeticulture Network chat that you will always see in Snakes and Stogies and different things are field herping all over the place. So there are pictures all over social media from all of our friends that are connected to the network. Everybody's finding cool stuff as we go into the fall and the year kind of winds down. So that's always exciting. Puget Sound Pythons who are connected to us. I was just messaging them. They have super cool shirts and hoodies. I can't wait to see those. Man, there's tons of cool stuff happening with people that are attached to the network. I don't know. I say this every time, but it's cool people. Like, we keep having good people get added to the mix, right? That's kind of the community aspect I don't know. It's not really a planned thing, but it's just kind of coming together, which is probably how a community should come together. That's what people mean when they say organically. I think they don't actually know what they mean, but I think that's what it actually is meant to be. It's just a bunch of people showing up with common interests and morals and all of those good things. There are constantly people being added to our Herpeticulture Network chat. At some point, it's just, I don't even know. I don't know if there's a limit to the size of the chat, but there's so many people in there, probably a bunch of you who are listening to this or who show up in the chat. You all get messages and stuff all the time. We're always talking, sharing pictures and bouncing ideas. If you are listening to my voice, either in a live chat or somewhere while you're driving to work, start messaging those people. If you want to talk, if you want to find stuff out, figure out what they do, buy a weird lizard with a leaf stuck on its nose, just start talking to them. If you see them or hear them in connection to this show or the network, they're cool. They're cool people. There's no pretentious space here. Everybody is really cool. You're looking at a dude on a super old brown couch with my couch pumpkin. So, yeah, I love every bit of it. I'm so glad. And like I said, while we were waiting for Justin, I have booked guests all the way through to the end of the year. I have a really cool idea for the start of the year, and we'll see how many of those guys listen to this episode and whether or not they start hitting me up in the chat. But I think to start the year off, probably not actually January 1st, because that would, I assume, be difficult for a lot of people to do. But my first show for January, I'm going to try and do a eublepharid round table with some folks connected to the network. And so we will see if we can put that together for the new year. But before we get to that, we got a bunch of other guests. They're already all lined up. So I'm grateful to them for coming to hang out and talk to me. And you guys will see the next one in another 2 weeks. Later.